Hi YouTube. All right, so we are doing book club today. It is chapter 36, page 316. So today we are doing chapter 36, page 316 of A Court of Thorns and Roses. If you guys are new here, my name is Steph. I'm traveling the country in my Jeep with my dog. Tonight we're in Utah. We're camping out in my tent. I was just live on TikTok hanging out with everybody. I made a cup of tea and we're gonna read our book for a little bit. I'm gonna probably be live for an hour or two and then I'll go back over to TikTok. Hi Campfire, Southern Combat Veteran's Daughter, Kevin, New Leaf, Tasia. Thanks you guys for coming over. Yeah, we're gonna read the book for a little bit tonight, probably 2 chapters. I know last night we did 3 chapters. Tonight we'll probably do 2 chapters. Hi Steph, hi Ghost Flowers, Misty, Trista, MC in the house, Tammy, Lady Zay, Aaron. Hi you guys. Carolina. Yeah, last night I did 3 chapters, but I will say that makes me very tired. So I think 2 chapters is probably the sweet spot because that 3rd chapter ended up being like kind of longer too. I was like, oh man, but I didn't want to leave it at a cliffhanger. You know, it was a cliffhanger. So we had to finish the next chapter. April in the Keys. You fell asleep in the 3rd chapter. Yeah, it'll be okay with 1. Yeah, we'll do 2 chapters. If I need to put in my other contact, I will. Maybe I should, huh? Should I put in my contact real quick? I bet you it'll probably give me... My contact fell out. My contact fell out. Campfires was reminding me. My contact fell out on the live stream a minute ago. I'm gonna actually put it on because I bet it'll give me a headache if I'm trying to read and don't have both contacts in. It's like do one or the other, but not one of each. Are you guys good at putting in your contacts? Can you put it in without looking in the mirror? I just put it in without looking in the mirror. I can put mine in and out without looking in the mirror, but I had trouble on the live stream earlier. So now my eye is going to be a little goofy, but oh well. Hi Donna, Aaron. Hi Dee. Can't be one-eyeing it, I know. Hi you guys. I think most of you probably are coming over from the other live stream. Grateful to have good vision. Yeah, if you guys have 20/20 vision, you're pretty lucky. I don't think my vision's that bad. I think I'm 1.78 or something. I forget now. 1.75. All right, so anyways, we're just gonna get into it. I'm gonna read. This is A Court of Thorns and Roses. We are on page 316. My plan is to read 2 chapters and then probably go back over to TikTok and hang out on the live stream. What, a pizza? Yeah, pizza would be nice. You always get fuzzies in your eye. I know, you know, I'm really big on not wiping my hands with like a towel and stuff to get because you always get the fuzzies on your hands. So I rinse with water and I try not to have any fuzzies, but it's hard because even baby wipes and towels, they all have fuzzies that you get on your hand, you know, and then they get in your eyeball. Yes, he came from TikTok. It's so annoying, isn't it, Jackie? Yeah. So you know what I do? I rinse my hands with water and then I let them air dry. Whoa, Campfires gifting memberships ×5. Jada, Samantha, Kimberly, Christopher, and Taste Like Chicken all got memberships just now. W's in the chat for Campfire. Thank you, Campfire. Sharon, I'm here for the reading. Aaron says woo. Lenny says my eyes are beautiful. Thank you, Lenny. Thanks, everybody. Okay, we're gonna read. Let's go. We're gonna read a couple chapters. This is not an audiobook, so I do make commentary, and you guys can be in the chat if you want, and you can say things to each other, you know, you can whatever, and sometimes I'll react to it, sometimes I won't. So use the chat like a chat room if you want, and then just remember if somebody's bothering you. Carolina with the $4.99 super chat. Robert with the $3 super chat. Let's go. Thank you so much, Carolina, Robert, everybody. Thank you. Heck yeah. Remember, if anybody's bothering you in the chat, you can always block them. You won't see them anymore. Hi, Samantha, Deborah, Trista. Hi, you guys. All right, we're starting off strong tonight. Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you for the love. Hi, City. Hi, Sharon. All right. Chapter 36, page 316. The sounds of a teeming crowd reverberated against the passageway. My armored escort didn't bother with drawn weapons as they tugged me forward. I wasn't even shackled. Someone or something would catch me before I moved 3 feet and gut me where I stood. I don't know this word. The cacophony of laughter, shouting, and unearthly howls worsened when the hall opened into what had to be a massive arena. There had been no attempts to decorate the torch-lit cavern, and I couldn't tell if I had been hewn from a rock or if it was formed by nature. The floor was slick and muddy, and I struggled to keep my footing as we walked. But it was enormous, a riotous crowd that turned my insides cold as they stared at me. I couldn't decipher what they were shouting, but I had a good enough idea. Their cruel, ethereal faces and wide grins told me everything I needed to know. Not just lesser fairies, but high fae too, their excitement making their faces almost as feral as their unearthly brethren. Whoa, Miss Kara with the $1.99 super chat. Let's go. Thank you, Miss Kara. Thank you for that. Heck yeah. I was hauled toward a wooden platform erected by the crowd. Atop it sat Amarantha and Tamlin, and before it, I did my best to keep my chin high as I beheld the exposed labyrinth of tunnels and trenches running along the floor. The crowd stood along the banks, blocking my view of what lay within as I was thrown to my knees before Amarantha's platform. The half-frozen mud seeped into my pants. Ugh. I know that feeling. That's not a good feeling. Whoa, Aaron. I rose on trembling legs. Around the platform stood a group of 6 males, secluded from the main crowd. From their cold, beautiful faces, Clover's such a loud snore. From their cold, beautiful faces, from that echo of power still about them, I knew that they were the other High Lords of Prythian. I ignored Rhysand as I stood as soon as I noticed his feline smile, the corona of darkness around him. Amarantha had only to raise a hand and the roaring crowd silenced. It became so quiet that I could almost hear my heart beating. Well, Feyre, the queen said. I tried not to look at the hand as she rested it on Tamlin's knee, that ring as vulgar as the gesture itself. Your first task is here. Let us see how deep that human affection of yours runs. I ground my teeth and almost exposed them to her. Tamlin's face remained blank. I took the liberty of learning a few things about you, she said. It was only fair, you know. Every instinct, every bit of me that was intrinsically human screamed to run, but I kept my feet planted, locking my knees to avoid them giving out. I think you'll like this task, she said. She waved a hand and the adder stepped forward, a part of the crowd, clearing away the lip of a trench. Go look. I obeyed. The trenches, probably 20 feet deep, were slick with mud. In fact, they seemed to have been dug from mud. I fought to keep my footing as I peered in further. The trenches ran in a maze along the entire floor of the chamber. MC gifted a membership. Whoa! Jen Bean got one. MC, thank you so much. Get your hand off my man's knee, says Jackie. MC, thank you so much. W's in the chat for MC. Get your hand off my man's knee. All right, hand slammed into my back and I cried out as I had the sickening feeling of falling before suddenly being jerked up by a bone-hard grip, up into the air. Laughter echoed through the chamber as I dangled from the adder's claws, its powerful wing beats booming in the arena. I swooped down to the trench and dropped onto my feet. Mud squelched and I swung my arms as I teetered and slipped. More laughter, even as I remained upright. The mud smelled atrocious, but I swallowed my gag. I turned to find Amarantha's platform now, floating to the lip of the trench. She looked down at me, smiling the serpent's grin. Rhysand tells me you're a huntress, she said, and my heartbeat faltered. He must have read my thoughts again, or maybe he'd found my family. Amarantha flickered her fingers in my direction. Hunt this. The fairies cheered, and I saw gold flash between spindly, multi-hued palms. Betting on my life, on how long I would last once this started. Whoa, Aaron gifted 5 subscriptions. Let's go. Melinda, Moon, Terry, Crafty, and Sherry all got gifted subs just now. Whoa. Aaron, thanks for gifting those memberships. You guys, you members and people gifting and everything, just thank you. You keep this going. MVP. W's in the chat for Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. I raised my eyes to Tamlin. His emerald gaze was frozen, and I memorized the lines of his face, the shape of his mask, the shade of his hair one last time. New Leaf, gifting subs. Holy moly. 5 people just got gifted memberships just now by New Leaf. Neha Official, Miss Kaylin Coulter, Oogly Moogly, and Sophia all got gifted memberships just now. Thank you so much, New Leaf. Heck yeah. That's so funny. You guys are awesome. Let's go. You guys rock. Yeah, that's so fun. I raised my eyes to Tamlin. His emerald gaze was frozen, and I memorized the lines of his face, the shape of his mask, the shade of his hair one last time. Release it, Amarantha called, and I trembled to the marrow of my bones as a great groaned, and then a slithering, swift moving noise filled the chamber. My shoulders rose toward my ears. The crowd quieted to a murmur, silent enough to hear a guttural kind of grumble, so I could feel the vibration in the ground as whatever it was rushed at me. Amarantha clicked her tongue, and I whipped my head at her. Her brows rose. Run, she whispered. And then it appeared, and I ran. It was a giant worm, or what might have been a worm, had its front end not become an enormous mouth filled with a ring of fire and razor-sharp teeth. It barreled toward me, its pinkish brown body surging and twisting with horrific ease. These trenches were its lair, and I was dinner. Sliding and slipping on the reeking mud, I hurled down the length of the trench, wishing I'd memorized more of the layout in the few moments I had, knowing full well that my path could lead to a dead end where I would surely... The crowd roared, drawing out the slurping and gnashing noises of the worm, but I didn't dare glance over my shoulder. The ever-nearing stench of it told me how close it was. I didn't have to breathe for a sob of relief. I didn't have the breath for a sob of relief as I found a fork in the pathway and I veered sharply left. Why did I get gifted a membership? Because you randomly got gifted one, Christopher. Holy moly. Where is the pan? What pan? I don't know what you mean. All right. I had to get as much distance between us as possible. I had to find a spot where I could make a plan, a spot where I could find an advantage. Another fork, I veered left. Perhaps if I took as many lefts as I could make a little circle and somehow come up behind the creature. No, that was absurd though. I'd have to be 3 times as fast as the worm, and right now I could barely keep ahead of it. I slid into a wall I had made another left and slammed into slick mud. Cold, reeking, smothering mud. I wiped it from my eyes to find the leering faces of fairies floating above me, laughing, and I ran for my life. I reached a straight, flat stretch of trench and threw my strength to my legs as I bolted down its course. Clover, you're snoring so loud. I feel like I'm yelling over Clover. Clover, wake up. Clover, you're too loud. Is your guys' dogs as loud of snorers as mine? All right, where am I? Okay, end of page 319. Clover. It's not that bad. Okay, good. You wish you could sleep as soundly as Clover. Clover sounds like a grown man. She does. Your dog snores loud too. You love Clover snoring. She's so loud. She reminds me of my dad, how loud he used to snore. I reached a straight flat stretch of trench, and threw my strength to my legs as I bolted down its course. I finally dared to look over my shoulders, and my fear became wild and thrashing as the worm surged into the path hot on my trail. I almost missed a slender opening to the side of the trench thanks to that look, and I gave up valuable steps as I skidded to a halt to squeeze myself through the gap. It was too small for the worm, but the creature could probably shatter through the mud. If not, its teeth could do the trick, but it was worth the risk. We're on page 320. The other campers, I don't know if they can hear me or not. I'm pretty far away from everybody else, thankfully. Whoa, MC gifted a membership. Justin T got it. MC, thank you so much. Thank you for the membership. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. I know that those are random, so we don't always know who gets them. Hopefully it's somebody good. Thank you for gifting the memberships. You guys are awesome. As I made, W's in the chat for MC. As I made to pull myself through, a force grabbed my back. No, not a force, but the walls. The crack was too small, and I'd so frantically thrown myself through it that I'd become wedged between it. My back to the worm, and too far between the walls to be able to turn. I couldn't see as it approached. The smell, though, I could smell, and the smell was growing worse. I pushed and pulled, but the mud was too slick, and it held fast. The trenches reverberated with the thunderous movements of the worm. I could almost feel it wreaking breath upon my half-exposed body. Could hear those teeth slashing through the air, closer and closer. Not like this. It couldn't end like this. I clawed at the mud, twisting, tearing at anything to pull me through. The worm neared with each of my heartbeats, the smell nearly overpowering my senses. I ripped away mud, wriggling, kicking, and pushing, sobbing through the gritty teeth. Not like this. The ground shook. A stench wrapped right around me, and hot air slammed into my body. Its teeth clicked together. We're on page 320, towards the middle. You remember being grossed out by this part. Grabbing onto the wall, I pulled and I pulled. There was a squelch and a sudden release of pressure around my middle, and I felt the crack, sprawling in the mud. The crowd sighed. I didn't have time for tears of relief as I found myself in another passageway, and I launched further into the labyrinth. From the continuing quieted roars, I knew the worm had overshot me. But that made no sense. The passage offered no places to hide. It would have seen me stuck there, unless it couldn't break through and was now taking some alternate route and would spring upon me. I didn't check my speed, though I knew I wasted momentum by smashing into the wall after wall as I made each sharp turn. The worm also had to lose speed making these bends. A creature that big couldn't take the turns without slowing, no matter how dexterous it might be. What are you reading? This is ACourt of Thorns and Roses. I risked a look at the crowd. Their faces were tight with disappointment and turned away entirely from me toward the other end of the chamber. That was where the worm had to be. That was where the passage had ended. It hadn't seen where I went. It hadn't seen me. It was blind. Oh, the worm is blind. We're on page 321. I was so surprised that I didn't notice the enormous pit that opened before me, hidden by a slight rise, and it was all I could do not to scream as I tumbled in. Air, empty air. I slammed into ankle-deep mud, and the crowd cried out. The mud softened the landing, but my teeth still sang with the impact. But nothing was broken, nothing hurt. She still has all of her teeth, you guys. A few fairies peered in, leering from high above the gaping mouth of the pit. I whirled around, scanning my surroundings, trying to find the fastest way out. The pit itself opened into a dark, small tunnel, but there was no way to climb up. The wall was too steep. I was trapped, gasping for breath. I fumbled a few steps into the blackness of the tunnel. I bit down on my shriek as something beneath my foot crunched hard. I staggered back, and my tailbone wailed in pain. I kept scrambling away, but my hand connected with something smooth and hard, and I lifted it to see a gleam of white. Through my muddy fingers, I knew the texture all too well. It was bone. Twisting onto my hands and knees, I patted the ground, moving further into the darkness. Bones, bones, bones of all sizes and shapes. I swallowed my scream as I realized what this place was. It was only when my hand landed on the smooth dome of a skull that I jumped to my feet. I had to get out now. Feyre, I heard Amarantha's distant call. You're ruining everyone's fun. She said it as if I were a lousy shuttlecock partner. Come out. I certainly would not, but she told me what I needed to know, that the worm didn't know where I was. It couldn't smell me. I had precious seconds to get out. You picture it 10 by 50? Have a wonderful evening. You too, Gen X. This is so good. Oh, man. Oh, man. We're on page 322. As my sight adjusted to the darkness of the worm's den, mounds and mounds of bones gleamed, piles rolling away in the gloom. The chalkiness of the mud had to be from the endless layers of them decompressing. I had to get out now. I had to find a place to hide that wasn't a death trap. I stumbled out of the den, bones clattering away. Once more in the open air of the pit, I groped one of its steep walls. Several green-faced fairies barked curses at me, but I ignored them as I tried to scale the wall, made it an inch, and slid to the floor. I couldn't get out without a rope or a ladder, and I plunged further into the worm's lair to see if there was another way out that wasn't an option. Of course, there was a back door. Every animal's den had 2 exits, but I wasn't about to risk the darkness, effectively blinding myself and completely eliminating my small edge. I needed a way up. I tried scaling the wall again. The fairies were still murmuring their discontent. As long as they remained that way, I was fine. I again latched onto the muddy wall, digging into the pliable dirt. All I got was freezing mud digging beneath my nails as I slid to the ground yet again. The stench of the place invaded every part of me. I bit down on my nausea as I tried again and again. The fairies were laughing now. A mousetrap, one of them said. Needing a stepping stool? Cried the crowd. A stepping stool. I whirled toward the pile of bones, pushed my hand hard against the wall. It felt firm. The entire place was made of packed mud, and if this creature was anything like its smaller, harmless brethren, I could assume that the stench, and therefore the mud itself, was the remnant of whatever had passed through its system after it sucked the bones clean. Disregarding that wretched fact, like, why is she even saying that anyways? Disregarding that wretching fact, I seized the spark of hope and grabbed the 2 biggest, strongest bones I could find. Both were longer than my leg and heavy. So heavy. As I jammed them into the wall, I didn't know what the creature usually ate, but it must have at least been cattle-sized. What's it doing? What's its planning? Asked the fairy. Above me, I grabbed a 3rd bone and impaled it deep into the wall as high as I could reach. I grabbed a 4th, slightly smaller bone and set it into my belt, strapping it across my back. Testing the 3 bones with a few sharp tugs, I sucked in my breath, ignoring the twittered fairies, and began climbing my ladder, my stepping stool. The 1st bone held firm, and I grunted as I grabbed the 2nd bone and pulled myself up. I was putting my foot on a step when another idea flashed, and I paused. The fairies, not too far off, began to shout again. But it could work. It could work if I played it right. It could work. It had to work. I dropped back to the mud, and the fairies watched me, murmuring their confusion. I drew the bone from my belt, and with a sharp intake of breath, I snapped it across my knee. If Amarantha wanted me to hunt, I would hunt. I walked in the middle of the pit opening, calculating the distance, and plunged the 2 bones into the ground. I returned back to the mound of bones and quickly made work of whatever I could find that was sturdy and sharp. When my knee became too tender to use as a breaking point, I snapped the bones with my foot, one by one. I stuck them into the muddy floor beneath the pit until the whole area, save for one spot, was filled with white lances. So she's doing that so the worm will run into them and die, right? I think so. I think she's taken all the bones and she's put them into the tunnel there, and the worm's going to come in and just... I didn't double check my work. It would succeed, or I would wind up among these bones on the floor. Just one chance. That's all I had. Better than no chances at all. I dashed to my bone ladder and ignored the sting of the splinters in my fingers as I climbed to the 3rd rung, where I balanced before embedding a 4th bone in the wall. We're on page 324. And just like that, I heaved myself out of the pit mouth and almost wept to be exposed to the open air once more. I secured the 3 bones I'd taken in my belt, their weight a comforting presence, and rushed to the nearest wall. I grabbed a fistful of reeking mud and smeared it across my face. The fairies hissed as I grabbed more, this time coating my hair, my neck. Already accustomed to a staggering reek, my eyes watered only a little as I made swift work of painting myself. I even paused to roll in the ground. Every inch of me had to be covered, every damn inch. If the creature was blind, then it relied on smell, and my smell would be my greatest weakness. I rubbed mud on me until I was certain I was nothing more than a pair of gray-blue eyes. I doused myself a final time, my hands so slick that I could barely maintain a grasp on one of the sharp-ended bones as I drew it from my belt. "What's it doing?" asked a fairy. A deep, elegant voice replied this time. "She's building a trap," Rhysand said. "But the Midgard relies on its scent to see," Rhysand answered, and I gave him a special glower for him as I glanced at the rim of the trench and found him smiling at me. "And Feyre just became invisible," he said. His violet eyes twinkled. I made an obscene gesture before I broke into a run, heading straight for the worm. Just read this book is banned in public schools in Utah. No way. Is this book banned in Utah? That's so funny. Why? What? Why do they do that? Why do they, like, a book like this? Come on. Have they not heard of Lord of the Rings? That's kind of poetic that I'm reading this in Utah. We're on the bottom of page 324. I placed the remaining bones at especially tight corners, knowing well enough that I couldn't turn at the speed I hoped I would be running. It wouldn't take much to find the worm, as a crowd of fairies had gathered to taunt it, but I had to get the right spot. I had to pick my battleground. Well, I guess there are some steamy chapters. Maybe that's why. They don't want the love chapters. Or maybe it's the mud. Utah has a special thing about mud, maybe. All right, on page 325. I slowed to a stalking pace and flattened my back against the wall as I heard the slithering and grunting of the worm, the crunching. The fairies watched the worm, 10 of them, with frosty blue skin and almond-shaped black eyes, and giggled. I could only assume they'd grown bored of me and decided to watch something else died, which was wonderful, but only if the worm was still hungry, only if it would respond to the lure I offered. The crowd murmured and grumbled. I eased around the bend, craning my neck. Too covered in its scent to smell me, the worm continued feasting, stretching its bulbous form onward as the fairies dangled what looked like a hairy arm. The worm gnashed its teeth, and the blue fairies cackled as they dropped the arm onto its waiting mouth. I recoiled around the bend and raised the bone sword I'd made. I reminded myself of the path I'd taken and the turns I'd counted. Still, my heart lodged in my throat as I drew the jagged edge of the bone across my palm, splitting open my flesh. Blood welled, bright and shining as rubies. I let it build before clenching my hand into a fist. The worm would smell it soon enough. It was only then that I realized the crowd had gone silent. Almost dropping the bone, I leaned around the bend to see the worm. It was gone. The blue fairies grinned at me. Then, shattering the silence like a shooting star, a voice, Lucian's, below the chamber. "To your left!" Lucian yelled. I bolted, getting a few feet before the wall behind me exploded. Mud sprang as the worm burst through, a massive shredding teeth just inches away. I was already running so fast that the trenches were a blur of reddish brown. I needed a bit of distance or else it'd fall right on top of me. But I also needed it close. So I couldn't... Sorry. I also needed it close. Where did I go? But I also needed it close. So it couldn't check itself. So it was in a frenzy of hunger. All that purring, Ernie. I took the first sharp turn and grabbed onto the bone rail I'd embedded in the corner wall. I used it to swing around, not breaking my speed, propelling me faster, giving me a few more seconds on the worm. Then a left. My breath was flame, ravaging my throat. The second hairpin turn came upon me, and again I used the bit of bone to hurtle around the bend. My knees and ankles groaned as I fought to keep from slipping in the mud. Only one more turn, and then a straight run. I flipped around the final turn, and the roaring of the fairies became different than it had been earlier. The worm was a raging, crashing force behind me, but my steps were steady as I flew down the last passage. The mouth of the pit loomed, and with a final prayer, I leaped. There was only black open air, reaching up to swallow me. I swung my arms as I careened down, aiming for the spot I'd planned. Pain barked through my bones, my head, as I collided with the muddy ground and rolled. I flipped over myself and screamed as something hit my arm, biting through the flesh. But I didn't have time to think, to even look at it, as I scrambled out of the way as far into the darkness of the worm's den as I could get. I grabbed another bone and whirled when the worm plummeted into the pit. It hit the earth and lashed its massive body to the side, anticipating a strike to kill me, but a wet, crunching noise filled the air instead, and the worm didn't move. I squatted there, gulping down burning air, staring into the abyss of its flesh-shredding mouth, still open wide to devour me. It took me a few heartbeats to realize the worm wasn't going to swallow me whole, and a few more heartbeats to understand that it was truly impaled on the bone spikes, dead. Bum, 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 bum. I didn't entirely hear the gasps, then the cheering. Didn't quite think or feel very much of anything as I edged around the worm and slowly climbed out of the pit, still holding the bone sword in my hand. Silently, still beyond words, I stumbled through the labyrinth, my left arm throbbing, but my body tingled so much I didn't notice. The moment I beheld Amarantha on her platform at the edge of the trench, I clenched my free hand. Prove my love. Pain shot through my arm, but I embraced it. I had won. I looked up at her from beneath lowered brows and didn't check myself as I exposed my teeth. Her lips were thin, and she no longer grasped Tamlin's knee. Tamlin, my Tamlin. Purr. No, just kidding. I tightened my grip on the long bone in my hand. It was shaking all over, but not with fear. Oh no, it was not fear. I'd proven my love, and then some. Well, Amarantha said with a little smirk, I suppose anyone could have done that. I took a few running steps and hurled the bone at her with all my strength. It embedded itself in the mud at her feet, splattering filth onto her white gown, and remained there, quivering. The fairies gasped, and Amarantha stared at the wobbling bone before touching the mud on her bodice. She smiled slowly. Naughty. Naughty, she said. Had there not been an insurmountable trench between us, I would have ripped her throat out. Someday, if I lived through this, I would skin her alive. I suppose you'll be happy to learn that most of my court lost a good deal of money tonight, she said, picking up a piece of parchment. I looked at Tamlin as she scanned the paper. Her eyes were green. Her green eyes were bright, and though her face was deathly pale, I could have sworn there was a ghost of triumph on his face. Let's see, she went on, reading the paper as she toyed with Jurian's finger bone at the end of her necklace. Yes, I'd say my entire court bet on you dying within the first minute. Some said you'd last 5 minutes. She turned the paper over, and just one person said that you would win. Insulting, but not surprising. I didn't fight as the adder hauled me off the trenches, dumping me at the foot of the platform before flying off. My arm burned at the impact. Amarantha frowned at her list, and she waved a hand. Take her away. I tire of her mundane face. She clenched the arms of her throne hard enough that the whites of her knuckles showed. Rhysand, come here. Rhysand, I bet you Rhysand said that she would last. And he was smiling. I think that there's going to be a weird love triangle, but there's not much left to the book. Do you think that Rhysand is going to be complicated? I bet you he's going to be a complicated character, and it's going to be like a thing in the second book. You think so? He's going to be complicated, and she's going to have mixed feelings, kind of like Katniss. Okay, do you remember Katniss and the Hunger Games, and how she had complicated feelings for the two guys in the book? So when she left and had to go fight for her life with this other guy, when she went back to the original guy, he wasn't as appealing, you know? So it gets complicated. I bet you she's going to have complicated feelings. Yes, you'll never tell. Did I predict it? We'll see. Rhysand, come here, she yelled. I didn't stay long enough to see the High Lord prowl forward. Red hands grabbed me, holding tightly to keep from sliding off. I'd forgotten the mud cake on me like second skin. As they yanked me away, a shooting pain shot along my arm, and agony blanketed my senses. I looked at my left forearm then, and my stomach rose at the trickling blood and ripped tendons at the lips of my skin pulled back to accommodate the shaft of bone shard protruding clean through it. Ugh! I couldn't even glance back at Tamlin, couldn't find Lucian to say thank you before the pain consumed me whole, and I could barely manage to walk back to my cell. All right, so that's page 328. I swear I keep hearing something out there. I want to take a peek just to make sure, because what if somebody's breaking into my Jeep right now? Hello? Hello? I don't see anybody. Hello? Wouldn't that be funny if there was like some kids breaking into my Jeep or something? Use your flashlight. All right. Page 329, chapter 37. We're going to read one more chapter and then we're going to go back over to TikTok. Chapter 37. Hello? No one, not even Lucian, came to fix my arm in the days following my victory. The pain overwhelmed me to the point of screaming whenever I prodded the embedded bit of bone, and I had no other option but to sit there, letting the wound gnaw at my strength, trying my best not to think about the constant throbbing that shot sparks of poison lightning through me. I'm a dude? What do you mean, Cypher? You think I'm a dude? I'm not a dude, Cypher. Are you a dude or are you a girl? What does it matter? What if I was a dude? Would that change how you feel about my reading skills? That video would go viral. It probably would if some kids were breaking into my Jeep while I was reading. But worse than that was the growing panic. Panic that the wound hadn't stopped bleeding. I knew what it meant when blood continued to flow. I kept one eye on the wound, either out of hope that I'd find the blood clotting or the terror that I'd spy the first signs of infection. I couldn't eat the rotten food they gave me. The sign of it aroused such nausea that a corner of my cell now reeked of vomit. It didn't help that I was still covered in mud and the dungeon was perpetually freezing. I was sitting back against the far wall of my cell, savoring the coolness of the stone beneath my back. I'd awoken from a fitful sleep and found myself burning hot, a kind of fire that made everything a bit muddled. My injured arm dangled at my side as I gazed dully at the cell door. It seemed to sway, its lines ripping. Hello, Jackie. Your extended warranty is expired. All right, we're on page 330. The heat in my face was some kind of small cold, not a fever from infection. I put a hand on my chest and dried mud crumbled into my lap. Each of my breaths was like swallowing broken glass. Not a fever, not a fever, not a fever. My eyelids were heavy, stinging. I couldn't go to sleep. I had to make sure the wound isn't infected. The door actually did move then. No, not the door, but rather the darkness around it, which seemed to ripple. Real fear coiled in my stomach as a male figure formed out of that darkness, as if he'd slipped in from the cracks between the door and the wall, hardly more than a shadow. Rhysand. Rhysand was fully corporal now. His violet eyes glowed in the dim light. He slowly smiled from where he stood by the door. What a sorry state for Tamlin's champion, he said. Oh, man. Go to hell, I said, but the words were little more than a wheeze. My head was light and heavy all at once. If I tried to stand, I would topple over. He stalked closer with that feline grace and dropped into an easy crouch before me. He sniffed, grimacing at the corner splattered with my vomit. Smegsy. I tried to bring my feet into a position more inclined for scrambling away or kicking him in the face, but they were full of lead. Rhysand cocked his head. His pale skin seemed to radiate alabaster light. I blinked away the haze, but I couldn't even turn aside my face as his fingers grazed my brow. What would Tamlin say, he murmured, if he knew his beloved was rotting away down here, burning up with fever? Not that he can even come here, not when his every move is watched. I'm waiting for Rhysand to purr. I kept my arm hidden in the shadows. The last thing I needed him to know was how weak I was. Get away, I said, and my eyes stung at the words that burned in my throat. I had difficulty swallowing. He raised an eyebrow. I come here to offer you help, and you have the nerve to tell me to leave? Go away, I repeated. My eyes were so sore that it hurt to keep them open. You made me a lot of money, you know, he said. I figured I would repay the favor. I leaned my head against the wall. Everything was spinning like a top, spinning like a top. I kept my nausea down. Let me see your arm, he said. I kept my arm in the shadows, if only because it was too heavy to lift. Let me see it, he growled. Without waiting for my reaction, he grabbed my elbow and forced my arm into the dim light of the cell. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. I bit it hard enough to draw blood as rivers of fire exploded inside me. As my head swam and all my senses narrowed down to the piece of bone sticking through my arm, they couldn't know how bad it was, because then they would use it against me. Rhysand examined the wound and he purred. No, I'm just kidding. Rhysand examined the wound, a smile appearing on his sensuous lips. Now he has sensuous lips. Come on. Okay, this is weird. Oh, that's wonderfully gruesome, he said, and I swore at him and he chuckled. Such words from a lady. Get out, I wheezed. My frail voice was terrifying as the wound. Don't you want me to heal your arm? His fingers tightened around my elbow. At what cost, I asked, but kept my head against the stone, needing its damp strength. Oh, that, living among fairies, has taught you some of our ways. I focused on the feeling of my good hand on my knee, focused on dry mud beneath my fingernails. I'll make a trade with you, he said, casually, and gently set my arm down. As it met with the floor, I had to close my eyes to brace against the flow of the poisoned lightning. I'll heal your arm in exchange for you. I'll heal your arm in exchange for you. For 2 weeks every month, 2 weeks of my choosing, you'll live with me at the night court, starting after this messy 3 weeks trial business. Oh, snap. So he wants her to live with him for 2 weeks after the trials are over every month. So she gets half of her time with him and half of her time with Tamlin. Oh, man. No way. It's a trap. My eyes flew open. No. I'd already made one fool's bargain. No, he braced his hands against his knees and leaned closer. Really? He asked. Everything was starting to dance. Get out, I said. You turned down my offer for what? I didn't reply, so he went on. You must be holding out for one of your friends, for Lucian, correct? After all, he healed you before, didn't he? Oh, don't look so innocent. The adder and his cronies broke your nose, so unless you have some kind of magic you're not telling us about, I don't think human bones heal that quickly. His eyes sparkled and he stood, pacing a bit. The way I see things, Feyre, you have 2 options. The first and the smartest would be to accept my offer. I spat at his feet, but he kept pacing, only giving me a disapproving look. The second option, and only a fool would take, would be for you to refuse my offer and place your life, and thus Tamlin's, in the hands of chance. He stopped pacing and stared hard at me. Though the world spun and danced in my vision, something primal inside me went still and cold beneath that gaze. Let's say I walk out of here. Perhaps Lucian will come to your aid within 5 minutes of me leaving. Perhaps he'll come in 5 days. Perhaps he won't come at all. Between you and me, he's been keeping a low profile after his rather embarrassing outburst at your trial. Amaranth is not exactly pleased with him. Tamlin even broke his delightful brooding to beg for him to be spared. Such a noble warrior, your high lord. She listened, of course, course, but only after she made Tamlin bestowed Lucian's punishment, 20 lashes. Oh. I started shaking, sick all over with again to think about what it had to have been like for my High Lord to be the one to punish his friend. So Tamlin had to give Lucian 20 lashes. That sounds painful. Rhysand shrugged, a beautiful, easy gesture. So it's really a question of how much you're willing to trust Lucian and how much you're willing to risk for it. Already you're wondering if that fever of yours is the first sign of infection. Perhaps they're unconnected, perhaps not. Maybe it's fine. Maybe the worm's mud isn't full of festering filth. And maybe Amarantha will send a healer. And by that time, you'll either be dead or they'll find your arm so infected that you'll be lucky to keep anything above the elbow. My stomach tightened into a painful ball. I don't need you to invade my thoughts to know these things. I already know what you've been slowly realizing. He again crouched in front of me. You're dying. My eyes stung and I sucked my lips into my mouth. How much are you willing to risk on the hope that another form of help will come? I stared at him, sending as much hate as I could into my gaze. He'd been the one who caused all of this. He'd told Amarantha about Claire. He'd made Tamlin beg. Well, he asked, and I bared my teeth. Go to hell. Swift as lightning, he lashed out, grabbing the shard of bone in my arm and twisting it. A scream shattered out of me, ravaging my aching throat. The world flashed black and white and red. I thrashed and writhed, but he kept his grip, twisting the bone a final time before releasing my arm. Panting, half sobbing at the pain reverberating around my body, I found him smirking at me again. I spat in his face. He only laughed as he stood, wiping his cheek with the dark sleeve of his tunic. This is the last time I'll extend my assistance, he said, pausing by the cell door. Once I leave the cell, my offer is dead, and I spat again. He shook his head. I bet you'll be spitting on death's face when she comes to claim you too. He began to ripple with darkness, his edges blurring into endless night. There's something outside. I think it's an animal. I can't tell over Clover's snoring. You heard it too? Yeah, I'm sure it's fine. He could be bluffing, trying to trick me into accepting his offer, or maybe he's right, I might be dying. My life depended on it more than my life depended on my choice, and if Lucian was indeed unable to come, or if he came too late, I was dying. I'd known it for some time now, and Lucian had underestimated my abilities in the past, had never quite grasped my limitations as a human. He'd sent me on to hunt with a Suriel with a few knives and a bow. He'd even admitted to hesitating that day when I had screamed for help. And he might not even know how bad off I was, might not understand the gravity of an infection like this. He might come a day or an hour or a minute too late. Rhysand's moon's white skin began to darken into nothing but shadow. Wait, I said. The darkness consuming him paused. For Tamlin, I would sell my soul. I would give up everything I had for him to be free. Wait, I repeated. The darkness vanished, leaving Rhysand in his solid form as he grinned. Yes. I raised my chin as high as I could manage. Just 2 weeks? Just 2 weeks, he purred. I can't make it up. I swear to God, he purred. Purred, that's the word, purred. Just 2 weeks, he purred and knelt before me. 2 teensy tiny weeks with every month is all I ask. Why and what are to be the terms, I said, fighting past the dizziness. Oh, he said, adjusting the lapel of his obsidian tunic. If I told you those things, there'd be no fun, would there? I looked at my ruined arm. Lucian might never come, might decide I wasn't worth risking his life any further. Not now that he'd been punished for it. And if Amarantha's healers cut off my arm, Nesta would have done the same for me. for Elaine, and Tamlin had done so much for me, for my family. Even if I had lied about the treaty after sparing me from its terms, he still saved my life that day against the Nagra, and saved it again by sending me away from the manor. I couldn't think entirely of the enormity of what I was about to give, or else I might refuse again. I met Rhysand's gaze and said, 5 days. You're going to bargain, Rhysand laughed under his breath. 10 days. I held his stare with all of my strength. A week. Rhysand was silent for a long moment, his eyes traveling across my body and my face as he murmured, a week it is. Then it's a deal, I said. A metallic taste filled my mouth as magic stirred between us. His smile became a bit wild, and before I could brace myself, he grabbed my arm. There's totally an animal outside. I'm trying to think of what they could get, though. There's nothing out there, is there? He was after my boots? Clover's snoring. Get the flashlight out. Hopefully it's not a skunk. Oh my gosh, what if it was a skunk? Then where would we be? Mice, maybe. Maybe a raccoon? I don't know. Maybe a mouse. I don't know. I saw something move the tent side of the tent, though. It has to be something pretty tiny. It's got to be like a mouse or something. Okay. We're almost through. Nesta would have done the same for me. Oh, wait. We're negotiating. The smell of magic. Where are we? His smile became wild before I could brace myself. He grabbed my arm. There was a blinding quick pain, and my scream sounded in my ears as bone and flesh were shattered. Blood rushed out of me, and then Rhysand was still grinning when I opened my eyes. I hadn't any idea how long I'd been unconscious, but my fever was gone. My head was clear as I sat up. In fact, the mud was gone too. I felt as if I'd just bathed. But then I lifted my arm. What have you done to me? Rhysand stood, running a hand through his short dark hair. It's custom in my court for bargains to be permanently marked upon flesh. I rubbed my left forearm and hand, the entirety of which was now covered in swirls and whorls of black ink. Even my fingers weren't spared, and a large eye was tattooed in the center of my palm. It was feline, and its slitted pupil stared right back at me. Make it go away, I said, and he laughed. You humans are truly grateful creatures, aren't you? From a distance, the tattoo looked like an elbow-length lace glove. But when I held it close to my face, I could detect the intricate depictions of flowers and curves that flowed through to make up a larger pattern, permanent, forever. You didn't tell me this would happen. You didn't ask, he said, and so how am I to blame? He walked to the door but lingered, even as pure night wafted off of his shoulders. Unless this lack of gratitude and appreciation is because you fear a certain High Lord's reaction. Tamlin, I could already see his face going pale, his lips becoming thin as the claws came out. I could almost hear the growl he'd emit when he asked me what I had been thinking. I think I'll wait to tell him until the moment's right, Rhysand said. The gleam in his eyes told me enough. Rhysand hadn't done any of this to save me, but rather to hurt Tamlin, and I'd fallen into his trap, fallen into it worse than the worm had fallen into mine. Rest up, Feyre, Rhysand said, and he turned into nothing more than a living shadow and vanished through the crack in the door. Oh man, that's page 336. We're going to leave off on chapter 38. That was wild. Purring. I can't believe that. Author uses purring a lot. I mean, to each their own, but I'm not big on that word. Yeah, that is like, I don't know, to use the word purring a lot is kind of weird in my opinion. That was wild. Yeah. That was kind of funny though. It's kind of like a running joke now that she says purr. Farah, you're a dingaling. Can you read me a bedtime story? We just did, nobody. Okay, you guys. That's it for this. I'm going to go back over to TikTok. So if you guys want, you can go follow me over on TikTok. It's the same username, Steph Travels 1, Steph and Clover Travel. I'm going to go live over there for a little bit. This book is being, this is all recorded. So if you guys miss a session or whatever, you guys can always watch back the other episodes. It's about to get really good. Oh man, Vicky, and we're getting towards the end. So I bet it's going to be such a cliffhanger for the second book, huh? Yeah. Are you in a tent? Yeah, I'm in a tent. All right, you guys, I'm going to go over to TikTok. Everybody have a really good night. Thanks for all the love here on YouTube. We've got 76 people in here and 57 likes. Thanks, you guys. If you made it this far, throw some books in the comments. If you're rewatching this, throw some books in the comments. Let's see how many people rewatch this. Thanks, you guys. Love you all. We'll see you guys